In Mark 4, Jesus tells the parable of the mustard seed. He says, "In my kingdom, I can take things that are really small and I can make them huge." He says that the mustard seed will grow into a tree so huge that you can find shelter in its shade. Jesus takes small things and turns them into huge things. Check, check. Check. All right, here we go. So Haley and I are planting a church, and I want to talk to you about it. I want to tell you why we're doing it, what it is, and how we're going to do it. Spoiler alert, you're involved in the how part, because I don't think we can do it without you. First of all, here's what it is. We're going to plant a church called Mono Church. Mono means one, and the name comes from the unity we have in Jesus Christ. In Matthew 28, Jesus gives the Great Commission. And the Great Commission has clouds and it has dirt. And in the clouds, Jesus says, go and try to reach the whole world with the gospel. Try to reach every nation. And down in the dirt, he says, and make disciples. Disciple each other. And here's what I believe. I believe that as Christ followers, we have unlimited power to do both of those things. Because the gospel message has unlimited power for reach, and the process of discipleship has unlimited power for growth. And so this church is going to focus all of its energy, manpower, and resources on those two things: reaching people with the gospel and growing people through discipleship. Specifically, Mono Church will focus on evangelism online and discipleship in homes. We're going to reach people with gospel content like sermons and music and services, and then we'll connect them to discipleship experiences and gatherings in homes. So Mono Church will be a real church with real leadership and real gatherings, and when we reach someone and they respond, we'll connect them to one of the local Mono Church locations that'll be gathering in their city. So that is what Mono Church is. So let's talk about why. Why plant a church and why now? Well, every year we plant about 4,000 churches in America. But just to keep up with population growth, we would need to double or even triple that number. So we need about 8,000 to 12,000 churches planted in this country every year just to keep up. Man, that number is huge. But I heard something the other day that might make us think that the reality now is even worse. So I was listening to this interview, and it's between a man named David Kinnaman, who runs a research firm called Barna Group, and it's just a really well-respected research firm in the church world. And he's talking to a guy named Jon Tyson, who is a pastor in New York City. And what he said was pretty crazy. He said, at this point, we've reached a turning point. And this is the point where we've lost the church in America statistically. He said, based on all of the data he has, if you look at the trajectory of population growth in America, and you look at the trajectory of the decline of the church in America, at this point, we can no longer keep up. And each year we'll have less and less of a meaningful percentage of the population in America. This was his quote. He said, barring a genuine move of God and radical discipleship, statistically, we've lost the church. We can't get it back by human means. Man, that's crazy. So I think a few things are clear. We need more church plants, and we need God to do some miracles. Here's what that could look like. We get a picture of it in the early church. There's a book called The Rise of Christianity by Rodney Stark. And he said that in the first 70 years after the death of Jesus, Christianity went from just a few people to 100,000 people. And then in the next 200 years after that, it went from 100,000 to 33.8 million people. And at that point, that was half of the Western world. And then in 312 AD, the Roman Emperor Constantine became a Christian. Man, 3 people to 34 million people. That is the parable of the mustard seed. God starts with something really small, and then he makes it huge. I think that we have a huge opportunity to do that right now. So we're all here in America after this crazy COVID season, which has been like this forest fire that just swept through and disrupted everything and messed everything up. And we're looking around and we're in this landscape that's been burned down. And I think right now is the time to plant some seeds, to plant some little tiny mustard seeds and see what God could do with that. Let's take some little things and let God turn them into big things. My dad's a preacher in Georgia, so I grew up in the church, grew up as a preacher's kid, and when we went to that church, it was less than 200 people on a dirt road in the deep south in South Georgia. Then when I left for college, it was 4,500 people, and then now it's 9,000 people. And I loved growing up in that church, and I've loved observing that church over the years because I've loved to see the big things God has done there. But as I've thought about planting a church in America, I've been thinking back on some things I learned from my dad in that. Here are some things I've learned about planting a church in America. Church in America starts to work really well if you can get about 120 people in the room by the 2-year point. And the reason for that is when you get 120 people in the room, that's when you can afford more than one staff person. And you got to get to that point before the first guy burns out. That kind of makes sense, right? But here's the catch. In America, 120 people in a room cost $1.2 million. And here's where I get this from. It sounds crazy, but I got this from my dad. So my dad's church is a great church. They've built a lot of church buildings over the years. Like I said, it's like 9,000 people now. But one of the things he said as a rule in building churches is that every single seat costs $10,000. So if you want 500 seats, it costs $5 million. If you're trying to build a big building and you need to cut $5 million from the budget, you cut 500 seats. Isn't that crazy? So that would mean that to get to 120, you need $1.2 million. And what's interesting is that this works even in Seattle. So at Cross and Crown, our building is worth about $6 million. And guess what the fire chief says is our capacity, 600 people. Every seat at a church in America costs $10,000. So 120 people times 10,000 is 1.2 million, and that's how it works. So man, I'm sitting here in 2020 thinking about planting a church in America, and that is terrifying. How did we ever keep up? It's no wonder we couldn't keep up. That's so expensive. I think we do have kind of a problem in America right now in 2020. I mean, obviously we do, because statistically we're not keeping up with population growth in America. But there's nothing wrong with the way the church works. Evangelism still works. Discipleship still works. I think we have a math problem. I think that this is not mustard seed math. This is not something where you start small and God makes it huge. This is like the opposite of that. This is where you start huge with a premise that every single seat costs $10,000. I don't think that the church in America has a strength problem, because we have the gospel, and the gospel has unlimited power to reach people. We have the process of discipleship that Jesus taught us how to do, and that has unlimited power to see people grow in their faith. We have the Holy Spirit with us, and obviously the Holy Spirit has unlimited power. We don't have a strength problem. I think we have a weight problem. I think our problem is our strength to weight ratio. This is why the guy that always wins the CrossFit games is 5'7", 130. Someone my size could never win the CrossFit games. It's not just about strength. It's about strength to weight. And I think there might be a less expensive way to reach people and get people in churches in America. We need to totally flip this math, and I think we have an opportunity to do that. I think we have an opportunity to start small and let God make it huge. Now let me share a story of my own experience of this kind of mustard seed math that I'm talking about. So I've had this really weird experience in the past 5 years, and I didn't understand until recently why I had had this experience. But it's an experience I had with the band I lead. It's called a band called Ghost Ship. A lot of you know it, but it's a Christian band, and I started the band. And here's what happened in the past 5 years. So Haley and I took $50,000 of our own personal money, and over the course of a few years, we decided to spend it on creating gospel content and trying to reach as many people as we could with that content. And so that was in the form of like songs and albums and videos and stuff like that. But here's what happened. It was kind of crazy. Initially, that content reached 1.25 million people. That was kind of wild. And then of those people, a smaller group responded in a positive way. So 25,000 people responded and said, hey, I like that. I want to hear the next thing. I want to join an email list or subscribe to something or follow you on something. That way I'll hear the next thing that comes out. But then of that group, an even smaller group really engaged. So 10% of those people, about 2,500 people, started to engage with everything we were doing. You know, they would come to every concert or buy every album or buy every new merch item that came out. It was just a really engaged group of people. And I thought about that recently. I'm like, man, that'd be kind of cool to apply that to church planting. So here's how it worked. We took $50,000. 1.25 million people was the initial reach. Then of that, 2% of those people responded, so that was 25,000. And then of those people, 10% of them engaged, 2,500. And I thought, man, that was such a weird experience to just take some money and try to reach as many people as you could and see what happened. Man, what if you could apply that to church planting? And I've been thinking of this strategy: reach, respond, engage, send. So let's take the same thing we experienced with GoShip and let's apply it to planting a church. But let's take the numbers and make them a little bit more conservative. Like instead of 2% responding, let's say only 1% respond, right? Only 1% of the people respond in a positive way at all. But maybe here's what it could look like. I think it could be mustard seed math. Reach, respond, engage, send. What if this was possible? Start in the same exact place, all right? Start with $50,000 and you reach 1.25 million people. That's your reach. But instead of 2% responding, let's say only 1% respond. And that would be 12,500 people. But then like last time, 10% of that group engages, and that's 1,250 people. But here's the exciting part, and I think this is where church stuff is different than band stuff. Let's say that 10% of those people, of these 1,000 people who are really engaged and all this content that's coming out and everything, but let's say that 10% of them engage locally and join the mission locally and join the church. And this is where the send idea comes from. 125 are actually sent on mission, and they're part of the church and they join local churches. Isn't this number crazy? Because we talked about it earlier. You need to get to 120 people to have a church, but in America that costs $1.2 million. But in this way, God gave the opportunity to get there with just $50,000. That's crazy. I don't know if that would work, but if it did, that would be amazing, because before, $50,000 meant just 5 seats in a church in America. And if God could do this, God could put 125 people in church in America for the same amount. That's that mustard seed thing I'm talking about. Instead of every single seat costing $10,000, God reaches all these people. He reaches 1.25 million people, and then you divide that number by 10,000, and you end up with 125 people on mission. I don't know if it could work, but if it could, it would be amazing. So here's my question for you today. Should we try it? I kind of want to try it. I kind of want to do the same thing again, and I'm going to. I'm going to take $50,000 of my own money and invest it in a very similar way. So we sold our house and we made $50,000 more than we thought. I want to take that and invest it in this church plant and spend it on creating gospel content and trying to reach as many people as possible with that content. Kind of the clouds of the Great Commission that we talked about earlier. But what if we do it together? What if I put $50,000 down, and then other churches put $50,000 down, and then you collectively put $50,000 down, and friends and family put $50,000 down, and God starts multiplying those seeds? It could look like this. This is what it could look like. This would be crazy. Instead of 50,000, you start with 200,000. Okay? It doesn't go to anything else except trying to reach people with the gospel, the clouds of the Great Commission. And if 50,000 could reach 1.25 million, then you do some math, and 200,000 could reach 5 million. Okay? We can reach 5 million people with $200,000. And then 1% of these people respond. 50,000 respond. And then 10% of these people engage. 5,000 engage. But here would be the most exciting part. 500 people in a local church. 500 people on mission. 500 people sent. That'd be amazing. If that could work, it'd be awesome. Every dollar would reach 25 people. You could take a mustard seed that's just $1. Take a $1 seed and plant it and reach 25 people. Take a seed that's just a $20 bill and reach 500 people. You could take $100 and reach 2,500 people and then expect 5 of those people to engage in a local church. The seed is just $100. And what God does is huge. 5 people in church. God is flipping this whole situation on its head. God is flipping the math. We're going from American economy to God's economy, where He takes small things and makes them huge. There's eternal implications of that. Let's try it. Let's try it. It's worth trying. Okay, we got to plug in the light. So, stop recording.